As the former CEO of a £2 billion company, he's seen it all. From the tough calls, to the bold pivots, to the kind of leadership lessons you just don't find in a textbook. In this episode, we dig into what it actually takes to lead at the top. Get ready for an unfiltered conversation about vision, grit, and the future of business. Dwain McDonald, welcome to Behind the Chain podcast.
Thanks for inviting me.
No, I really appreciate it, and I'm excited. I feel like we've known each other for a long time, and I think you've always been a name that holds a lot of weight. And
I'm nervous what's coming next. I feel like you're going to build this up and then go, whoa, what a great question. Go on, Joey, I'm all ears.
But what I want to ask, I'm going to be asking everyone this question when they come on, is at what moment did you realise you were going to be a major business leader, and where were you at in life at that point?
That's a good question. Oh, crikey. I was very fortunate. So go back to about 2005, all right? So 20 years ago. So I would have been 39 then. So I was late 30s at that stage. And I worked for a lady called Kay Phillips, who was CEO at the time. Actually, yeah, she was CEO between 2005 and 2008, and I subsequently took over from her in 2008. But she had a guy there called Des Smith, and Des was the guy I worked with for 30-odd years, and he did everything for her around operations, and I was about the same in sales.
Yeah.
So there was sort of these two people that sat on her exec team. I wasn't probably actually a director at that stage. It would be like probably a junior associate director or something like that.
Yeah.
But I just remember thinking to myself, I was mid-30s then, I'd got 3 kids that were fairly young and everything else. I'd been travelling down from Stoke-on-Trent to Birmingham every day. There was no working from home then days, it was Monday and Friday as we did. And she sort of said to me, I just think you're the person that's going to take over, And she just sort of able to develop me. She did it in a very calm way. She never raised her voice. She never swore anything. She was totally opposite to me in that respect. But she obviously saw something in me. And then maybe I thought at that stage, I'm going to be this business leader. And the funny thing was, I tell you, I know exactly the day that I got told I was going to be the CEO.
Yeah.
Because it was my wife's 40th birthday.
Oh, wow.
Wow. So Kay did one of these things where she would often say to you, oh, just before you go, can we just get 10 minutes? Right?
Yeah.
And I imagine it was a Friday night, right? And she come and said, oh, can we just have 10 minutes? Now, the thing with Kay, 10 minutes turned into be 3 hours. And I knew it was my wife's 40th birthday.
Yeah.
Right? And then I couldn't ring. And she went, well, just do it now. We just do it now. Just come in the office. Before you know it, doors shut, mobile phone's out of the way from that. Some 2.5 hours later, I end up ringing up. My wife's really not very happy. More or less puts the phone down, it's my 40th birthday and all this, that, and the other.
It's a big one.
So by the time I got home, she wasn't very impressed. And I've got this news now that I'm going to be the new CEO.
Yes.
But not until the 31st of March the following year.
Right.
So I got told on November the 30th, I have to tell nobody other than my
12
wife.
months.
From the November to the following March. But I can't tell my kids. I can't tell my dad. I can't tell anybody.
Oh,
so sometimes, when people go like, oh, I can't really keep secrets. I thought I kept one for 4 months. And I always remind myself that I woke up the following morning and my wife was just about talking to me then and I didn't tell it. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, what do you think about waking up next to the new CEO? And there's this laughing in the bedroom then at that stage about like how I held on to this story overnight and how my boss didn't tell me. So I sort of knew on the November the 30th of that year that I was definitely going to be the big boss, but it probably started about 2.5 years before.
Oh, awesome. That's amazing. And I guess, did you feel confident when you were told that?
Oh, God.
Like, or how did you feel?
Like the whole, is it an imposter syndrome where you kept thinking to yourself, am I going to be okay? And I remember I took over in 2008, the famous year, the financial crash.
Yes.
Woolworths went. And I honestly, stupidly for me, I suppose, I kept thinking I was going to get like some big handover. And there was no handover. It just didn't happen for whatever reason, right? And again, I walked in and suddenly went into what was her office on that first day, thinking there's going to be some manual on the desk saying, this is how to be a CEO, this is what you need to do. Obviously, there wasn't, right? And then during those first few months, we knew things were going to go bad. And then I remember the EUK, and then they owed me a load of money. And then, Woolworths went, and that was my biggest client. And I remember thinking, what am I doing? And how do I make sure nobody loses their job? That's all I could think about was, right, I didn't worry about the profit, the EBIT, and we worked so hard that year. And we did this thing called rings of defense. Mm-hmm. So we put the people in the center of like an onion. Yeah. And then as you peeled off stuff. So imagine on the outside, it was like, we had a box at Aston Villa or something like, right, bang, get rid of that. And then you're going in, don't buy any stationery and don't do this. The whole concept was, don't lose any people because it's not their fault. Yes. And I remember we worked so hard, and I think we made the same amount of money as the previous year. And we didn't give the pay. I always remember the unions were like, no pay award. And we gave a bonus at the end of the year, which was equivalent to a pay award. But they never let me forget that, but you remember, Dwain, on that year, we didn't get it built into our basic salary. And I was thinking, well, you didn't quite realise all the things we had to do to get to that stage. But that was one of the most toughest things that we did right at the beginning, 2008.
It sounds very iconic. To say that happened, the crash,
you look through
first year CEO,
it's no manual, nobody to ring up, and you just have to go, you just got feel sometimes, and then you do things you do wrong, and then you think, well, I didn't really work, I'll just try something else. I suppose I am, look, if I'd have gone for a job now, if I was young again now, with no MBA, no degree, people would just look at me. I wouldn't get any chance. I just don't think I would. Yeah. But it wasn't like that in the 80s. I didn't know people who went to university. I just didn't. I had, a CSE grade 1 and an O level. And I started doing a youth training scheme. I mean, it was 25 quid a week. It was £5 a day. Yeah. I mean, it was really the bottom of the pile. But I think being in sales, which I still classify myself in sales now, being in sales, you don't need that. It's not about that. It's about having empathy with people. It's about like spotting a problem and how do you lead and inspire people. And fortunately, I was able to do all those other things and the rest sort of fell into place. But I always surrounded myself with really good people, excellent people in IT, fantastic finance person. That way then I think, well, I don't have to worry about that because you're all going to do that. I just know a little bit about a lot. Yeah. And that was my sort of style and still is really today.
Amazing. No, and I guess for the people listening, when you did take DPD on as CEO and you stepped into that position, what did DPD look like as a company profile in terms of,
we were pretty much run of the mill. Right. In them days, for people who are a little bit older, you remember a brand called Securicore was about then it became Yodel and and from there. And to be honest, in them days, you walked into somebody and you said, hey, Joey, how many parcels you send? 1,000 a week. How many parcels per consignment? 1.2, 10 kilos a box. What you paying? £2.79. So if we could do it for £2.75, will you give me a go? It was as bad as that. Honestly, it was. Yeah. And again, to be honest, the whole thing started, we needed to save money and we needed to optimize our delivery vans to be able to deliver smarter. Yes. So everything you see now in 2025 was really built back in 2008, 2009. And I don't just mean for DPD. Yeah. And I say that in a very affectionate way about DPD. I mean for all the parcel carriers. Yeah. Right? They all needed to route optimize to save money. And one of the guys I just mentioned previously on the podcast, Des Smith, who's retired now, he found a way of optimizing the route. I sat in a room. He was presenting it to me. I said, what's that over there? He said, that's the time we're going to be delivering. And that's your one light bulb moment that you might only ever get one in your whole life. That was my moment. Yes. And I just went, you don't realize what you've just done there, do you? And he looked at me and I said, that's the holy grail of parcel delivery because you can now tell the person what time you're coming. Because before that, Joey, you would take 100 parcels out for delivery. You would bring 12 back because nobody was there. You weren't allowed to leave safe. They didn't know when you were coming. So guess what? You rang the gate. Nobody's in. You brought the parcel back. That means you've lost money on 12 parcels now because if you bring it back, realistically, you've made no profit on that. Yes. Nowadays, probably industry leading is 3%. And that's only really nowadays because you deliver mobile phones and you can't leave them safe, so you have to do that.
Yeah.
Listen, the toughest decision, I remember him and the ops director at the time walked in my office, and we talked about it and all this, that, and I came up with this idea about calling it Predict with a guy called John Acton. And the long and the short of it was, they came and they went, it's going to be really tough to aim this. I went, yeah. They went, well, we're not going to be able to do the 1 hour. And what do you mean you're not going to be able to do it? Of course you can do it. Well, it's going to be really hard. Anyway, if we took out all the expletives, Joey, there wasn't really a lot left in the call.
Yeah.
Right? Because I basically kicked him out of my office and said, I want it to be hard because I don't want anybody else to be able to do it as good as we can.
Yes.
6 months later, we'd cracked it. Right? So we started our first time, 65% of the deliveries were delivering in the 1 hour. And by the time 6 months later, we were delivering 98, 99% within the 1 hour from there. And it was hard work, and it was constant by all the operations people, sitting our drivers daily. But when we did that, suddenly then we differentiated.
Yes.
Now we differentiated. Now it was all about the 1 hour. And then basically every 6 months then, in my mind, any business needs to not quite reinvent itself, but it needs to excite its customers. So take an Apple phone, take Apple, you'll get a new handset in September. We know it's coming, right? We already know we want to buy it. We don't even know what it looks like, and we know it's going to cost us £1,000. Fantastic marketing.
Yeah.
But then in probably March, we're going to get a new software update, and there'll be lots of other new things now to do with photos and emojis and stuff like that. So my vision was like, let's copy what Apple do. It's good enough for them, it's good enough for us.
Yeah.
So we even had a big sign up in the IT department, talking about, the genius is working in the fishbowl. That was one of the comments that, always stuck with me from Steve Jobs. So that's how we differentiated. We carried on innovating. We did it every year. We launched the Sunday service. We launched the app. We launched reverse logic. We launched all these things. And then we would go out to our customers twice a year, very much like, look what we've done. Hi, this is new. And I would imagine if I was a competitor, I used to sit there thinking, oh no, what have they done now?
Yeah.
I've got to go faster again to try and keep up with them. But it allowed us to charge more money because the service was exceptional, the technology was exceptional. I surrounded myself and the whole leadership team with amazing people. That's quite tough.
Yeah.
Because you can come in, because I used to say, your customer already knows they can save money. They're choosing not to do that because look at the times their customer service department is quiet because we're not causing problems. We don't lose things. We don't damage them, whatever from there. So I think, the previous one about it's £2.79, I can do it for £2.75. That went.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that hasn't come back again now because things are very tough for people.
Yeah.
But for that golden period of probably for 7 years, we grew 100 million growth every year organically for 7 years. And again, I'm not telling you anything. It's already in the public record. So these are just big statistics from there. But yeah, we did it through innovation, technology, and people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how and when you go back to that Des moment, how did you make sure that the people were looked after at the same time as upping the expectation to be able to deliver?
It's a good question. And you do find yourself, Joey, that when you grow 1 billion organically, and you're like a little bit like a rocket ship, you do find yourself that, you've got what I call solid pros. A lot of guys in operations, in logistics, have perhaps been there for 20 years. They're a depot manager, and they don't really want to be the driver of the train. I used to call myself like, I'm like the driver of the train. Not everybody wants to drive the train. Other people like to be on the train.
Yeah.
Objectively, you've got to try and take everybody with you because if you felt that everybody was leaving the journey from there, you've got to struggle like that from there. And probably that was one of the things that I look back on and say, what could you have improved upon? I don't think I and the team focused enough about when people were leaving the organisation.
Yeah.
Right. And it became a project for me that I felt very passionate about. I used to call it Project Apollo. It was talking about the ability to shine a light in areas that other people... Oh, no, sorry, Project Apollo. That was one about something else completely. But yeah, there was a project, actually. I'm trying to think of the name. But the point about it was it was all about focusing on how many people had left the organisation. Even to the point, Joey, where you're in recruitment, that I would say often, yes, you have to set an expectation that people will leave because they want to retire or they're going to have a baby or they're going to live in another country. But then we would actually start benchmarking people and saying, well, how successful are you in your depot versus yours over there?
That's amazing. And I guess in terms of, what I know about DPD is they've got DPD Red, DPD Blue.
Yeah.
What was your responsibility across the franchise network as well as, Red, or was it total responsibility?
It was for both, and again, that was quite an interesting one. In the early days, we had 72 franchise depots, right? And then we had the Red business as well, right?
Yes.
So you imagine you were doing a conference maybe on a Friday, and you talk to the Red people, and you talk to another one of the Blue people from there. Now, quite rightly, they'd put their own money in.
Yeah.
Some of these people had invested, I don't know, £500,000 or whatever else from there, and it was a very difficult and very sad meeting. I remember the look on the faces of the people when I stood up and the decision was made. Equally, with lots of people, including the people in France, that they were going to buy back the franchisees, so they were going to make it a wholly owned situation, and that went on for 10 years.
Yeah,
that was a long time. There was a 10-year period where people knew that when the end of their contract was up, they were going to go. But you could have literally heard a pin drop in that room.
Yeah.
Because they had no idea this was coming. And obviously I had to give the news and all this, that, and the other. And that's when, 3 months later, the franchise had like a supervisory group, came to me and they said, we want to change our name. I was like, sorry, your name Interlink Express. We don't want to be called Interlink Express anymore.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? What do you want to be called? And they went, well, we want to be called DPD, like the Red one. I said, well, I've already got DPD. They went, we'll be called DPD Express. I said, what are you going to call them? And that's when we sort of pondered over this. And, sometimes you look around and you went like, oh, well, you've got like Tesco this and you've got Morrison's and Morrison's Local and all this, that and the other. And we went, listen, at the end of the day, you are unique about what you do then in your area. You are local people dealing with local people. And it became DPD Local. And we rebranded it as a blue cube, not a red cube. And the Interlink Express disappeared, and they continue to do that. But I'm unaware of. I think there may be a few franchisees left, but I would imagine by the end of 2025, because it was a 2015 to 2025. So I would imagine there's probably only a few left, if any, now.
And what was the big difference between Interlink and DPD Red?
The Red one was the big corporate machine that would have customers like. Vodafone and people like that from there. Whereas the sweet spot for the local people was always about the SME marketplace. One was a consignment and kilo customer, one was a box rate customer from there. So two very different ones from there. Quite often, your big volume shipper is like your Gymshark and people like that next. They don't want to pay con and kilo. They know what they're on, and they're on a box rate or a pack rate or whatever else from there. Your smaller client, your £500 a week, not £50,000 a week, has less buying power, is normally quite happy with a consignment in kilo, particularly if they're B2B.
Okay.
And I think Interlink Express became DPD Local was far more B2B in the beginning. I don't know what the number is now. I haven't been there a few years. But yeah, DPD was a lot more B2C as well. So B2C, B2B, consignment in kilo versus box rate. But what we always did, though, is the same level of tech was sitting underneath both businesses.
Right.
And what we did is, in the likes of London and Glasgow and places like that, we created shared service depots. So you'd have a depot that would have a blue sign and a red sign, and you'd have blue vans, and you got to make sure that the blue van had a blue guy in a blue uniform. It was always interesting to make sure that all worked out. But yeah, I think overall, because we had such a fantastic team, we made it work. And
yeah. Did it ever feel at any point that you were managing two different businesses, or did it ever feel like you had to,
it was always two different businesses, mate.
Pull in check.
The franchisees used to constantly think that the Red people were going to steal their customers.
Right.
Oh, God.
Paranoia.
Oh, yeah. It was unbelievable. The times I've sat there in meetings and said, no, they're not going to do that. Yeah, but I've got this example. And on June, that person went in and quite often, the salesperson walks in through the door, rings somebody up, they don't tell them they're using DPD, and they start chatting, and before you know it, they've opened up dialogue from there. It was very clear, don't steal, we're only maybe 12, 13% of the marketplace together. There's 85% left. But somewhere down the line, there was always a story. But yeah, the franchisees were an interesting bunch, let's say that.
Yeah. No, brilliant. Well, I guess you touched on the tech earlier. With the DPD app, was that your idea? And, how did the DPD app come about, and how did it get developed?
The DPD app started as a very simple 1, 2, 3 text message.
Yeah.
Go way back. It was text one, we had to keep it within 140 characters, but it was like, we're going to come tomorrow. If you're not going to be well, text 1 for the day after, 2 for the day after that, or 3 for the day after that. Right. The ability to pick and choose pre the 1 hour. So even way back. So having interactions with the consumer was the precursor to it. So first of all, it was like, we realise now if we talk to customers, they can stop us wasting that journey and that losing that money on that delivery from there. So that was the precursor. But yeah, it was my idea. I wanted an app. I thought this was going to be the cutting edge. I did not think it was ever going to get the level of subscribers that it got because we never spent any money on advertising. And this is the thing I'm telling the people in Australia at the moment now. All we did is we just put a banner at the bottom because, of course, when you're delivering so many B2C, you're sending all those emails with those 1 hours. Well, at the bottom, and by the way, if you want to give us your preferences in future, just download
the app.
Yeah, that was it. And
how many downloads did it get?
Oh, God, let me think now. I think it was regularly getting 50,000 downloads a week. I remember now spending time with different people. There's one guy called Max, fantastic guy. And I think he did something like 117 InVision slides. And then we set up this team and we sent parcels to each other before it went live and all this, that, and the other. And then it probably went through, 6, 7 iterations, and we improved it and we improved it again, and we gave you more things that it would do. But we always made it very clear, we don't need you to watch a training video. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm saying to the guys in Australia now. Nobody wants to watch a training video, right? My printing work yesterday, I was hating it. Why would you bloody YouTube? And I'm trying to get to it. I don't want to do that. It's got to be, it's instinctive. You've got to pick it up and go bang, 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 key it all in. Yeah. Straight away, there's my gate code. That's where I live. Took a picture. Oh, right, that's easy.
Simplicity.
And that simplicity, I think, I always have a very simple thought about technology. Create technology that's going to make your life easier. Don't create tech for tech's sake. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people who do that, and you go on the website and it's poor, and don't get me going on customer service. I bought some lamps, full enough, from a Manchester business. I won't name them.
Yeah.
300 quid. Bought on the 4th. No, I have no idea when it's coming. So I'm waiting for a tracking event, right? Yeah. So I go on Friday, email, go on, help at such and such, right? No feedback, nothing as of yesterday. So I think I'll phone. You get this, our lines are so busy, so we've switched them off. What do you mean you've switched them off? How can you've taken my money and then you switched them off? So my point is, if there was an app that would help me with that, it would be the best app in the world. Yeah. But now that customer, I'll never buy from them again. I'll clearly go and stalk them on LinkedIn, and I will get hold of somebody because you've got my 300 quid. Yeah. And at the moment, you're not telling me when the stuff is coming. DPD says, this is when it's coming. Track the driver. If you're not going to be in, don't worry. Tell me which neighbour. Joey, we knew 500,000 people had a neighbour they did not want us to knock on the door of. Yeah. And that's about 5 years ago. Okay. Now that's the power of owning data. Yeah. In the end, DPD will have, again, tens, if not 100 million pieces of data. Yeah. Because it's so good at delivering. I'm not going to say anything negative about DPD. I'm so positive about it. Right from there, is that at the end of the day, that's why it does what it does. But if you look at Every now, Every are doing everything the same. Yeah. Their app, the downloads, this, the picture, the map, the pin.
Who was the second to do the app in the market?
Oh, definitely Every.
Was it Every?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Right. I mean, half the other ones, I don't even think they've got an app that works now.
That's crazy.
Right? In 2025. Yeah. No. I would not like to compete with Every now. I think that everything that every seem to do now, you know, I think people still will always go back to, oh, and you know, this, that, and the other, and Hermes and whatnot. And then move on. They are absolutely bloody world class at what they're doing nowadays from there.
Yeah.
And I think them, DPD are the two primary ones at the moment now.
Yeah.
Without shadow of a doubt, from my perspective, the two leaders in the industry.
And when you said tech, you know, for tech's sake, because it doesn't necessarily have to be related to industry, right? But like, who are you thinking of when you say that? Like, have you had any experiences of tech for tech's sake?
You just think people who want you to download an app, like the Ivy, right? It's like download the app and download it. What am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
Is that all I can do? I could just book a table.
Yeah.
Is that what I can do? Because I'm not being funny. I can go to Wetherspoons. I can choose my food, put my table number in, pay for me bill, have the lady bring me my drink, and the food's hot, and I've paid 23 quid, and my granddaughter loves it.
Yeah.
Right? She's like, Grandad, take me the spoons, slice of pizza and spoons. Great tech. The Ivy, what a lovely brand.
Yeah.
What am I going to do with it? I'm not plugging you off the Ivy. Please don't come looking for me. But I'm just saying is,
no, I hear you.
I'm not keeping that on my phone because it doesn't really add a lot of value to me.
Yes.
Right, from there. Whereas the pay engines, you know, the Ring.goes and people like that, quickly this morning, don't need change anymore, book it and go.
Yeah.
A lot of the travel stuff is very good.
Yeah.
You know, some of the hotel stuff, not so great. They want you to book something. I want to contact people. Take the Four Seasons as an example. One of the finest brands in the world. I've been looking to stay in lots and lots of them. It has a chat functionality. I can chat before I get to the Four Seasons, or if I'm in the Park Lane in Four Seasons, which I don't go very often nowadays, and I want to change the pillar, or I want to order some food, or I want to do this, that, and the other. I'm chatting with somebody. I don't know. They could be in Dubai for me, for all I care. The fact of it is, it's exceptional customer services. That's why I think a lot of businesses need to move away from email now, Joey, and move into WhatsApp. Because if you go to the Middle East, I've just been recently in China, WeChat.
Yeah.
You pay on WeChat. You can book a taxi on WeChat. That ecosystem is incredible. I'm doing video calls. I'm doing voice calls. I'm literally walking up and scanning a barcode on a market stall and paying them 20 RMB for some stickers or something, or I'm booking a taxi. I mean, it's an ecosystem.
Yeah.
You don't come out of WeChat, right? And I think now we need to get WhatsApp needs to be in a communication channel that we as a British customer can use far better than what we get today. Because to me, this lamp story, I send an email.
Yeah.
Is anybody going to read it? When is it going to get read? If I saw 2 blue ticks, I feel comfortable. I know you've read that.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's enough of that.
Yeah.
So British customer services can learn a little bit from maybe the
I hear
Chinese.
you. No, I hear you. Yeah.
East.
No, me and my business partner, we've had plenty of chats about the painful getting passed around with CS and having to retell the story. It's it's painful. I guess, like, you know, you got really passionate about the whole customer experience, being yourself a customer, and like, is that where I guess your ideas came from when you were going through DPD? Was it through actually just, you know, maybe booking something using a different provider and just sort of seeing and analysing how that felt?
Joey, you know, having good experiences, I think, is the trailblazing experience that we're looking for. You know, I had a great experience with the EE yesterday. Fantastic. The guy quickly found me. He's like, I know you are. You've gone through security. He sends me this one-time PIN code. It was an enjoyable experience. I put the phone down and said to my wife, that's impressive. Yeah. That's impressive. I don't want to keep going on about the lamp, but, you know, that's the alternative experience that I'm going to have. Now, I'm only going to spend 35 quid a month with EE. So I'm not spending £3,000. You're going to spend like 450 quid in a year. Yeah. For that, they're going to supply me with all the service. So I look and I think sometimes is people think, oh, well, I'm not going to give this great experience because the transaction value is low. I used to get paid £4.50, but I used to try and convince my team in DPD that we should be like the Four Seasons. Yeah. So I used to say, well, they get 450. Well, of course, they get a lot more than 450 nowadays. And I'm not sure DPD gets much more than 450, but let's say it gets a £5 for a parcel. You have to try and give that same level of experience. And often, you know, talk to your wife, talk to your business partner, talk to your husband, talk to whoever, and just go like, tell me about an experience that works really well with you. Talk to me about something that's not worked well.
Yeah.
You know, often I would go to my wife, right, here, have a play with that app, tell me what you think. You know, and she'd be like, oh, that's a bit small, or da. It's that level of detail.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that that's when I went to Australia and I said, oh, do we tell people, you know, I'll give you an example. In Australia, nobody has a deliver to neighbour.
Right.
I'm like, what do you mean you don't have one? They went, oh, no, that won't work. What do you mean it won't work? Do you not like your neighbours in Australia? Of course we do, very friendly people. I said, I'm not forcing you to have it delivered to your neighbour. I said, but what about giving it as a choice?
Option. Yeah.
An option.
Yeah.
And everybody went, oh, yeah, quite like that. So we're building an app in Australia. And guess what? Lots of functionality that we've seen in the UK at the moment now. But we've already gone live with a 2-hour delivery window.
Yes.
Remember, Australia, much bigger country.
Yep.
From there, already we've seen the impact in customer services because people aren't tracking it. Where is my... The classic Wizmo,
Yes.
that stops that Wizmo effect from there. So this sort of passionate customer experience, to me, I go back to the beginning. I said I sort of class myself as a salesman from right at the beginning, and you're selling a service to a customer that you're hoping at the end of the day that they're going to want to use for a very long time. So you have to treat that customer like they could. I used to have another saying that, you know, imagine they're like your partner. You know, treat them like gold, and hopefully that they'll never leave you.
Yeah,
that's the point you should think about with a customer. You should never think intolerantly about a customer and think, you know, I don't really care about that. Don't have them as a customer.
Yeah.
You know? Don't sell me that lamp. If you didn't want to ship it to me, don't sell it, because I'm going to now complain to PayPal, and then you're going to spend loads more money on it from there. So, yeah, I think we probably are used to quite average customer service over here. But again, if I travel to North America or China or Australia and I see a better service, I just want to come back and I just want to push people in this country to do better.
Yeah.
And I think we can. I think a lot of people can improve.
Well, look, you know, you talk about Australia, and I know it sounds like you're doing quite a lot there, but just for people listening, what is it you're now doing, you know, and what are you involved in at the minute?
Okay. Look, since I've left DPD, I've helped a number of companies globally on logistics and parcels and customer experience and stuff like that from there. And there's a few people I've been helping out. One of them has been DHL eCommerce. So I've been doing work with their global CEO, a guy called Pablo, lovely guy. And I met an English lady called Christine Holgate a year ago, just over a year ago. She's from Cheshire. She's been living in Sydney for 20 odd years. And she runs a business called Team Global Express, which was Toll Group. So a lot of people, I'm not sure how many people are watching, listening to this, but people in Australia will go, oh, Toll Group, yeah, I know them from there. They have this business, Team Global Express, and it's an enormous business, and it's into pallets and freight and parcels and B2B and ships, and it has 42 planes. I mean, it's like a monopoly board of like everything about logistics in there. And I went over as a one-time gig to help advise on e-commerce, because they don't do a lot or didn't do a lot. And Australia Post is about 80+% of the marketplace, so there's quite a bit to go at. And Christine used to be the CEO of Australia Post, so obviously knows how big the opportunities are in e-commerce. And after a very interesting 40-minute meal in Macclesfield, funnily enough, not far from here, I went for a month, and the month turned into, can you come back? Can you come back? Can you come back? And in February, I went for the 4th time in a year. So I'd done about 10 weeks on the ground in Australia, 10, 11 weeks in Australia. Then I went to China with the group in March, and I go back to China at the end of May. And then I go on to Melbourne, Brisbane, and Sydney. And then I'm gone for about 17 days. So technically now, I report directly through to Christine as the global CEO. I was with her this morning. And yeah, my day starts very early in the morning because, of course, there's a 9-hour time difference. And a 7-hour time difference with China. But I'm responsible for their e-commerce and their international business, which is really great because it's all the stuff I've done for many, many years in the past. So they're global clients. So they have, great global clients at the moment now from there, based in China, North America, and in Europe.
Yeah.
And then part of what I'm dealing with at the moment now is trying to, you could never harness the e-commerce of China, but the volume with the Temus and the Sheins and people like that is quite incredible. And we have a real sweet spot in Team Global Express, and that's regional Australia.
Yeah.
And regional Australia is about 30% of the population live in regional Australia.
Wow.
So majority live in the cities of Adelaide, Perth, Brisbane, etc.
Yeah.
And so they are avid e-commerce shoppers from places like Temu. And we're already supporting the likes of Temu, and we've got lots of other clients that we're talking to at the moment. So I'm probably going to do far more flights to Hong Kong and then inwards in China than I am doing directly with Australia, because we're pretty well set up at the moment now from there. So it's about executing on that growth. And I'm not going to get into the numbers, but we're going to double our business this year. It's going to be 100% growth, and then it will continue to do that from there. So very exciting.
And I appreciate that. And I guess in terms of the marketplace of Asia and your Australias, what does that look like in comparison to the UK? Is the UK the daddy of e-commerce, and then these guys are catching up, or what's the lay of the land?
The lay of the land, every city I went to was 20 million people.
Right.
You go 4 cities and you go, oh yeah, how big is this country? Oh, it's a little bit bigger than the last one.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, is this the biggest city? And they went, no, that's, I think Chongqing, is it? And that's 32 million people.
Wow.
So I was sitting at an event with it was a very nice event actually. It was the ambassador of the Australian embassy, right? And I was sitting there talking to a gentleman at that stage from there, and I said, "Oh, he was from Austria." And I said, "Oh, you're married to a Chinese lady." They're like, "What's it like living in China?" And he said, let me give you an example, Dwain. We're going to go home and we're going to have let's make it up, a tomato salad, right? He said, and I've got a 25-minute walk home and I've realised we've got no tomatoes. He says, and my wife will say, can you order some? He said, I will literally get my phone out, tap, 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 and they will be delivered in 25 minutes.
Wow.
To my door.
And so it's just the tomatoes that come?
Just that. That's a very, very small order with a very small basket value. I stood outside an airline called Southern Airlines, China Southern Airlines, and we're waiting for the cab to come and pick us up. And we must have seen, no word of a lie, Joey, this is like about maybe 11:30 in the morning. 25 bikes, bang, bang, bang. People constantly in the pannier, as they call it, at the back of it, walking in through these doors. And I'm thinking, this must be some sort of reception area or something like that. There must be somebody taking all these, they're all bags of food, right? And I got to have a look at this. I just walked in, and it was just 2 doors that were wide open with just shelves on. And these guys are just literally pulling up, dropping them on a shelf, and they obviously messaging on the app, and then you see all these young people walking out of this building to come and collect this stuff.
Yeah.
It's on demand. We have a lady that works for us in Shenzhen at the moment now from there. She said to me, I just don't coop, Dwain. There's just so many fantastic places to choose from. Yeah. I've seen stuff that I've never seen over here. So we see locker boxes.
Yes.
China has locker boxes for food. So it'll have a window on. So if you've ordered from, let's make it up, Subway, whatever, and a Costa coffee, they will go, scan a barcode, open the door. There was one right outside the hotel we were staying at. I was fascinated watching people come and get the stuff. And it's just like, you've had food delivered, but we're not coming to the 27th floor or whatever. It's gone to the locker box, which is on the ground floor from there. Wow. So the on-demand concept is incredible. I left the laptop, my fault, in Beijing, in Shanghai. And I'd flown to Beijing. And when you're going through the airport and you go like, oh my God, my laptop's not in here. My iPad's not in here.
Panic.
A company called SF Express picked it up, boxed it, the hotel boxed it up. They picked it up. I had it the following day. And I went downstairs and I said, oh, so pleased. Thank you very much. They put it in my room and everything else from there. I said, oh, how much did that cost, by the way? And the woman, no word of a lie, the concierge said, oh, I'm very sorry, Mr. McDonald. It's actually 27 RMB. It's a little bit heavier. That's about £3.50, Joey.
Oh, my word.
Right. And I was like, wow. So this scale there's just perception to everything's going to be really quick. It's all going to be tomorrow. But you know what? I'd seen a lot of electric cars while I was over there.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, a lot of electric cars. So they are driving forward as well in Asia on the electric width from there. I think we are where we're very lucky compared to places like Germany, Australia, wherever. We're expecting all our shops to be open Saturday, Sunday until 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in meetings with guys from Germany, DHL, and they're like, oh no, they close at like lunchtime on a Saturday, and they're not open on a Sunday. Yeah. Hence the reason for have a lot more locker boxes, because they don't have the shop network that we. So we're very lucky. Look, we're a massively densely populated country with 66 million people, and Australia, we fit into one state of Queensland 7 times.
Yeah.
Right? There's a postcode in the middle of Australia near to Alice Springs. It's so big that when you draw a line around it, there's 14,000 people who live in that postcode.
That's insane.
Right? It's bigger than South Africa.
Wow.
It would be the 25th biggest country in the world, and there's only 14,000 people who live in it. So when you get outside of the Sydneys and the Melbournes and all this, that and the other, it's a big country, and there's only 27 million people in Australia. So enormous continent.
Yeah.
Not many people live there, but they do like online shopping, which is proving useful for me.
And that's interesting, because I think, like, if you go back to 2008, would you say that the UK was still behind at that point, you know, or...
Oh, yeah, I'd have thought we were behind America at that stage, but I think we overtook America at some stage with what we were driving, Predict, Precise, the app. If you're in Silicon Valley, you're constantly got some startup, you know, DoorDash or something else like that from there. Food delivery, like crazy in America at one stage. But I do think we were ahead of it. We were certainly ahead of Europe. Yeah. Right? Europe, I think, was always looking at the UK for its innovation, and then they would catch up a year or two after that from there. You know, some countries in Europe didn't even do Saturday deliveries, never mind Sunday. Right. And nobody could believe it when we went live with Sunday. Yeah. Nobody could. And we only did that because everyone were going to do it. I didn't want to be second.
First.
You know, you can't be second, can you? Yeah. But one of the most difficult things we ever did, launching a Sunday service, but my God, it was so important, not just for peak, because when all the other carriers are like, oh, we're going to work weekends, when you're not used to working weekends, it's really, really difficult. We were like, we already have 1,000 people that work on Sunday. So, but really tough, really difficult. Managers ended up working extreme hours to try and cover it. But again, when you're a year in and 2 years in, it becomes the norm after that from there. But listen, I'm a little bit out of the UK nowadays. I'm not quite sure the latest innovation. I've not seen anything in the last few years as a next thing. And I've not seen anything abroad other than what I see in China. But, you know, it's a massive country, but it's a massively dense country with population. So, of course, their efficiencies of scale is just huge in comparison to what we've got in the UK at the moment.
I've seen some of the construction, videos that you see. They just swarm their site with people, and it's up in like 2-3 months. And, here it's 12-month build, isn't it, cycle? So,
very different.
I hear you. Well, I guess from a retailer's perspective then, what do you think the differences are, what you're seeing from, an Australia market, an Asia market, compared to the UK market? What would you say, like, the big, and how the retailer operates? And
I was very lucky. I used to work with some really great people in ASOS. I'm not saying they're not great now. I just don't know anybody anymore from there. But at that time, Matt Rogers, who went on to do Gymshark, and before him, Stuart Hill, who took over at DHL, and John Camelodin before him as well from there. And, of course, Nick Baton, who I love to bits. They were driving us. We want more, Dwain. We want it innovation. We want it today. We want it yesterday. We want midnight cut-off. Whatever next they've got, we want to do that as well from there. And we were very lucky with that. And I felt as though we all developed and we all did very, very well in our businesses on the back of that technology and drive and one thing or another. I've spent some time now with a client called The Iconic in Australia. Yeah. And they're based in Sydney, and they are very, very similar. They are very, very similar at the moment now to what I've seen in the ASOS world. So from there, that dynamic e-commerce retail brand, fashion orientated, I've noticed that, like, you know, these people aren't just in the UK, they're in Australia as well. What they're doing is they're possibly starting from a slower starting point. Like, I would be very surprised if Australia started delivering on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Very surprised. Saturday, they don't like Saturdays, and they certainly don't like Sundays.
Yeah.
Not saying that's right or wrong, just saying is culturally,
Yes.
that's not in their world at the moment now from there.
Not accepted.
But the services that are available, the likes of the Iconic, are fast moving at the moment, people, which is funny, Joey, because I've got to tell you this story, right?
Yeah.
I'm stood in reception in Sydney, and I'm signing in, and I obviously spoke, and this lady's voice sort of went, "You sound familiar." Hello, how are you? And at one stage, she said she came from Cheshire. I said, "Ooh, you're posh, aren't you?" I said, "I'm from Stoke-on-Trent." She suddenly went, "Well, actually, I'm from Stoke-on-Trent, Dwain. Whereabouts are you from?" Her family lived a mile away from where my wife lived and where my wife's mum still lives now. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
It's gone 10,500 miles. She's the group logistics lady, a lady called Sue. Lovely lady.
Stars of a line moment.
I know, he stars a line from there, and then we're going to do some work together as well from there. So, yeah, very nice. But, what about that? What's the chances of bumping into somebody there? But anyway, yeah, it's good.
No, absolutely, yeah. And I guess, like, what sort of challenges are you sort of seeing at the minute for retailers, you know, out there? What do you think
It does
the
seem
biggest?
tough. Every time you speak to somebody, they all start with, how much is it going to cost?
Right.
How much is it going to cost? I do imagine that this whole, you know, driving footfall, you know, going away from the high street. We all go down high streets at the moment. I mean, we're in central Manchester, you know, everywhere's packed and there's no empty shops, wherever else from there. But you go around smaller bay places at the moment now, you know, parts of Stoke-on-Trent are a little bit of a ghost town.
Yeah.
You know, shops are closed, shut up. One thing, I was in the shopping centre yesterday. It used to be a hive of places and there's just shuttered shops now.
Yeah.
So clearly that's a problem. Then you obviously have the online-only guys at the moment, like the Iconic or like ASOS and whatever, and even they've had some issues lately as well from there. I mean, are people nowadays, though, they're seeing so much additional spend in there? You know, my daughter rang me today, they want to put my gas and electric bill up another 40 quid a month. That's a lot of money. She lives with a daughter. You know, so I think when you see yourself with less in your bank at the end, you do probably start to think to yourself, do I really need that shirt? Do I need another one? Do I need to pull back? Do I want my hair cutting twice a month? Couldn't it once a month? I think, you know, women's nails, hair, the lot. You know, there's a bubble of people that will be in Cheshire who will have plenty of money and they will never be able to be effective from there. But there's a big chunk of the rest of the world. And trust me, Stoke-on-Trent is one of the most working class cities that you'll ever find. And I think, like you said, at the end of the day, people's wages are fairly depressed and their bills are high. So therefore, then they're not going to spend with the retailer. So the retailer's got to work even harder.
Yeah.
I go back to my lamp story then. You're not going to buy any lamps from them because you just don't get a good service. Yeah. Whereas yesterday, I felt like the guy from EE was genuinely interested in doing some business with me yesterday.
Yeah.
And it was 34 quid a month.
Yeah.
Like, but you know what he did, though? I thought it was quite interesting. He said to me, though, Joe, he goes, it will go up £3, Wayne, every 12 months. So it'll go from 34 to 37. And I thought, and I'm quickly going, well, that's 10%. But I thought, yeah, you've set my expectation.
Yeah.
So I was okay with that. It's when you get these other ones where you go,
nasty surprise.
Nasty surprise. Nobody likes nasty surprise. And I thought, brilliant.
Yeah.
But like, I just think retailers have got to work hard. We've all got to work harder to get that money off those key people. And I go back to the Australian one. Like I was talking to Christine this morning and I was talking about these clients that are not big spenders in international import and export. I said to them, yeah, but Christine, I don't think often customers become what we call no one loves me accounts.
Yes.
Because they're like, oh, it's just small. It's just small. It's not the biggest account in the world. Yeah, but until you've rung them 3 times and you've absolutely identified there's no more opportunity in there, even then you should at least ring them twice a year. You can't not ring people and take them for granted. Because if you do, guess what? They're going to walk at some stage because somebody will show them some love.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I guess, you know, I want to get into, I guess, the building and what it takes to build a £2 billion enterprise. Yeah. So, and there'll be a load of parcel companies out there that are, you know, that are mid-market, you know, there'll be some SMEs, there'll be some startups and stuff. So I think they'll get a lot of value out of this. The thing have been exposed to is like the sales organization at DPD. And how did you set about, this like scaling the sales process or the sales organization at DPD? How big was it when you?
I think even before you do that, Joey, if I'm being honest,
Yeah.
before you can sell anything, you've got to have a clear proposition, right? And I've never done business schools, MBAs. I talk to MBA students now. I did one at Nottingham Business School a couple of weeks ago. And I think they probably not have met anybody quite like me because I'm just go straightforward. And I say things like, look, if you pick up some book and it starts talking about a book and it says like, visions, values, philosophies, it's just business bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? Just don't buy that. Don't buy that. That's how you do things from there. I wanted a clear vision, and I set about a 1, 2, 3 strategy, and I painted that on every wall in every building, and I talked about it consistently for 10 years, right? And it said, 1, let's deliver the best service money can buy.
Yeah.
I used to say you can buy it cheaper, but you're not going to buy it better. Okay, boom, number 1. Number 2, let's utilize the finest technology available.
Yeah.
That's the tech box. That's what we need to do. And the third one was recruit and retain the most customer-centric people in our industry.
Yes.
And I used to say to people I can't probably be as customer-centric as the Four Seasons because they have a ratio of 1 guest, 1 member of staff. I'm not quite like that. But remember, they're at 450 quid and I'm at £4.50. So that's that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then probably about 3 years, 4 years before I left, we created the 4th one, UK leader in sustainable delivery. That was it. And then we went from nothing to 3,000 electric vans, and we dwarfed everybody else's number from there. Once you've got that, and I remember a famous saying at a board meeting one time when Steve Mills, who was a lovely guy, who's the IT director, said, God, it sells itself, doesn't it? Sells itself. Nothing quite sells itself from there. But a highly motivated, well-paid, excitable sales force who had access to amazing data, and there was no pricing policy. There was a policy, but there was no pricing team.
Yeah.
We had a spreadsheet. You keyed it in, it told you the price. So we basically authorized you from day one. You were the first cab off the rank, and as you were knocking doors, and people would go, well, how much are you going to charge you? You'd be like, well, I'll ring you later. Okay, I can charge you that for you then. Whereas a lot of businesses make it so difficult, and they basically strangle the sales resource. They make it too difficult. You got to fill in 15 forms and all this.
Yes.
You should cut through all of that.
Yeah.
Just to cut through all of that. But then what we would do then is, you had the famous 100-plus club trip. Now, I didn't invent that. That was invented by a man called Colin Milbanks in probably, I don't know, maybe the late 80s, because he was one of the first CEOs I ever had from there. And it was about a trip for 3 days to Paris.
Yeah.
And in the end, it was 5 days at Sandy Lane in Barbados for you and your partner.
Yeah.
Right? 45 people with partners. I'm talking about 90 people going to Sandy Lane, right? But this was open to the best operations people as well.
Yeah.
So this was an ops and sales, but sales would be 75%. I don't know how they do it anymore. I was the custodian of it for 13 years, so I had the job of picking it, which I meant I would go on it, and all this, that, and the other from there. But those salespeople also had like an uncapped commission scheme.
Okay.
I can't think of anything worse than a salesperson who says, "Oh, well, once it hits that, you're not earning any more." Well, I'd be like, "Well, I don't really care about the customer anymore now from there." So it's a high risk, high reward strategy in sales. You don't keep a job forever. There's no guarantee.
Yeah.
You can't really be a bad one because if you are, nobody wants you anymore from there. They only want the guys who say, "Oh, I can sell this million and that million, the other one from there." It's not as high risk in customer account management.
Yeah.
It's still risk, but it's not as high.
Yeah.
You lose a customer, you don't get invited.
Yeah.
It's like, the customer left because, we've had a 10% reduction from such and such. New business is all about productivity. It's just about old school, knocking on doors. You make 70 dials, you make 10 appointments, you do 10 NP1s. This is all stuff that I did in 1988.
Yeah.
And I don't care who you are, and you don't need to door knock on industrial estates anymore because you've got the power of all of the different accesses that you can get through and LinkedIn and stuff like that from there. But somewhere down the line, you have got to pick the phone up and speak to people, which is a skill that young people are losing because, as you know, Joey, right, most people, if they can message or chat, It's not like that.
They'll take the easy option.
It's old school. Phone them up, write it in your calendar, go and see them. And, we've got to be careful about not going to visit anybody anymore, becoming this world of sitting there in your shorts.
From remote.
Remote, because a guy in China I spoke to yesterday, he's in Beijing, he's like, you're coming to Shenzhen. He doesn't even speak great English, right? And he's like, I'm going to fly to Shenzhen. I'm going to come and meet you.
Wow.
I was like, wow, okay, thank you. I look forward to seeing you. Respect. You're coming, I'm seeing a guy, he's seeing a guy. And I think we're all becoming a bit like, well, can we just do it on our Teams? And do this, that, and the other from there. So
easy option, convenience.
If I was driving any sales team now, and I've got some people that work with me in Australia, that's how we still work from our perspective.
So interesting, because I think during COVID, whilst there was that bubble, I think there was a bit of a thing going, especially in the parcel e-com space, where people were hiring, young, non-industry, very very hip type people, and it was just a really nice market. And I think they thought, these people get on with brand owners. It's it can be a bit of a younger culture, and I think it worked for 10 minutes during COVID. But then obviously when Brexit kicked in, it then quickly became, actually it's a tougher market out there. Yeah. And then there was a huge load of turnover.
You're an expert in recruitment, Joey, but there's always this, do we go and recruit somebody from a competitor because they know what we're doing? Or is that the worst thing you should do because they've instantly brought bad problems with them from where they came? Yeah. But I do think we do tend to quite often go, oh, you've been at such and such, so you must be good. Yeah. And that's not the way that, we used to have a guy called Sean Walsh who had a great technique. He never stopped interviewing. Yeah. He's a regional sales manager, right? He's from Halifax, right? As miserable as sin and as tight as you will leave. But do you know what? What a guy when it came to running a sales team. He was outstanding for me. Yeah. He worked with Dave Moores. He would constantly keep interviewing. Yeah. He would have people on a subs bench. Yeah. Yeah. And he would often get guys from, selling in, the old Yellow Pages and all that sort of industry. Somewhere there's tough sales. I think there's tough sales and there's really tough sales. Uh-huh. And I think having that sort of constant knowledge, you should, if it was me now, I'd be saying to people, if you lose somebody, you should have already thought that they were vulnerable and you should have already known who you're going to replace them with. Yeah. Right. Because if you then start ringing up agencies, no disrespect, Joey, and go, what have you got? Yeah, it's not a great start.
No. Yeah, it's so funny you say that because I was speaking to a client 2 weeks ago, and they just set out on a grad scheme, and I said, "How many grads did you hire last year at this initiative?" And I believe it was 7. Right. I was like, "Wow." For a grad scheme, I was like, I'd have been hiring 7 a quarter at least because you're going to get a dropout. Yeah. And if you retain 2 on a grad, not that that's the ideal, that's just, your red line. And, worst case, if you hire 2 people, that's how I think you'll build it. And, Sean Walsh clearly got that and delivered on it. And I think that's how you sustain then to be able to build out that national, that national footprint in sales and be able to go more geo postcode. Whereas I think that's sometimes the problem that these, mid-market parcel companies are facing is they just can't flesh out the sales team because of the attrition. But it's like you say, if someone's leaving, that should already be on the radar.
I think, again, though, quite a few sales companies, the salespeople want really quite big basics nowadays. Yeah. I started very old school with quite a low basic, but the reward was really attractive. Yeah. I can understand you've got mortgages now, you want a good basic salary and whatever else, but I think sometimes when you're in 60, 70K as a basic salary, have you really got quite that same desire as somebody who's on 35? Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure from my perspective, but there is still jewels out there. I did helped somebody to join DHL, and they have never sold parcels before, and they were absolutely outstanding. Mid-20s, no baggage, just hard work. And I remember sitting down with him having lunch, and I just literally tried to download into their brain, listen, let me give you an example. Give me a classic example, Joey. I said, do you know who knows everywhere? And they were like, no, we're drivers. Yeah. Go and be a friend of the driver. I said, sometimes the drivers don't want to be your friend because they don't want a late collection.
Yeah.
I said, so don't upset them by deliberately going and try and find a 5:30 in Cheetah Mill when they want to be out there by 4:30, whatever. I said, but the point is, they know these places behind blocks of flats and stuff that you'll never hear of from there. And he was particularly successful. And I remember him saying to me, I spoke to the depot manager, and I said, I'm getting loads of leads. And he went, yeah, because the other guy works from home all the time. You come in and you spend time with them. These old school practices, they do work.
Yeah.
Right? But everybody wants a shortcut. And I just want to sit at home and I want to do 2 hours in the morning and put my washing on at dinner time. Doesn't work like that. You can't build a $2 billion business like that. It doesn't work like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess, you talk about looking at the person's DNA. Like, what is it if these guys are coming to you and they don't have industry experience? Like, what is it you look for from a DNA perspective, or traits or habits, or what do you?
A lady came to do some training, and I remember back now vividly. This lady was called Diane Lawson. No, not Diane Lawson. Diane Larson's another lady who's also an industry legend, right, as this Diane. And I remember teaching me something very simple, because it's often these really tiny things that you work on. And she said, there's 3 things, Dwain, that you're going to look at. One's talent, one's experience, and one's culture.
Yeah.
I went, right, TEC. Oh, okay, how does that work? She went, well, you can be a big T, like a capital T, capital E, capital C, or a lowercase one. And I said, okay, give me an example then. She said, well, this guy's talented. Let's use somebody called Bill, and he works for Yodel, right? And he's been in the industry for 10 years, and he's been around the block, and he's been a depot manager in 3 places. So, he's obviously got that experience. So he's a big E, right, from there. And then you get somebody then that he might turn around and you say, well, how talented is he? Because we're going to base this on has he won any awards or this, that, and the other from there. But then the other one is the culture, right? So as a culture, so if you were recruiting a driver, for instance, you got a driver come up to you, oh, I've done this, I'm talented, I've got the experience, culture. If the culture, I'm not going to name any parcel carriers, but if the culture of that company is that you don't really matter whether you deliver in the 1 hour, or it doesn't really matter whether your vehicle is damaged, or it doesn't really matter whether actually you do any of the rules right, as long as you roughly do it right, he's not going to be a good cultural fit for DPD.
Yes.
Right? So it's that bit as well. So really, high cultural fit was often the likes of Sean would be going, how are you going to work with him as an individual? How are you going to gel from there? And then when I would be interviewing anybody, I obviously didn't interview that many times because clearly the directors never left, so it was fine from there. But when I'd be talking to people and doing workshops, I'd often talk about talent, experience, and culture, right? And all 3 of those things need to fit.
Need to align.
You need to, as a business, also be able to fit with that person as well, because really it's a 2-way thing. They're joining you. You've also got to look after them as well, right? From there, that's why we did that book, and it's funny actually. I saw somebody's trying to sell one on Etsy for £9.50, the famous book that we put together. But that was always about go and read that book. You think you want to join us, but read there, because that's going to tell you some things you might not like perhaps in the fact that we're going to judge you to 3 decimal places. So if you don't want to be judged to 3 decimal places, don't join the organisation. But I was looking for an image to do this presentation I'm doing on Tuesday. And I just thought, oh, right, I'll just Google it from there. Up became Etsy.
For sale.
£9.50 for sale. I thought, £9.50? Yeah. God, you're asking if you could for that. I'd sign it for £9.50. Sorry, Joey.
No, it's good. And I guess, was there ever a time then when DPD went through, I guess, a bit of a turnstile, period of staff? Like, was there ever a point where, because I totally, get the ethos and the hiring sort of strategy, but like, was there ever a time where there was a downward spiral on talent or people leaving? And
I was very lucky for the period I was there. I used to judge it based upon the conference, how many people come up and collect a 100+ award at the end of the year. Yeah. And we'd be having 25+ people every year. So to me, out of a team of 60 people, to have nearly 50% would win this trip, which meant they were 100% above their target, which went up every year. I felt as though that talent bank, there was the same people year after year after year after year would be able to do it. And then you'd always have the new kids on the block, and then you'd also have the ones that used to come up to me when they'd had a couple of drinks at the conference. I'm going to ring back next year. And I'm like, right, yeah, okay, I'll look for you. Some did, some didn't.
Yeah.
So I think going back to that 1, 2, 3, 4 strategy, everybody knew what they're doing.
Yeah,
you know what you're
very
doing.
clear.
How do I price it? Don't make it difficult for me to bring business on.
Yeah.
Do that, execute, and once the parcel comes into the system, I know they're going to get delivered. So therefore, then I'm not going to get the complaints. I'm confident then that customer's revenue and position with our business will just flourish one after another from there.
Yep.
So I think that was never really a problem. I never looked back at that and thought, oh God, yeah, we had the right drain of people. Many years ago, I remember Yodel became for a very short period of time, and the old Barclay brothers, like the Man City of talent. They were buying all my talent in, and there was people who left for the big dough.
Yeah,
and I could do nothing to stop it going.
Yeah,
they were paying big money into people, 20,000, and it was like their attitude at that stage. I kind of won't mention any names, was like, I'm just going to buy all the best talent.
Yeah.
And we re-recruited and we doubled down, and the good ones stayed, and we moved on, and they probably all left after 12 months and scuttled off to somewhere else from there. But at the time, that was about the only time we ever really lost anybody.
Yeah. Okay. No, interesting. And then I guess, it sounds like there's been a good strategy around sales. In terms of operations, what did you do to set a standard in the operation or out of the depots, or because I remember a story, and it was Dwain will go around with a white glove.
Yeah.
So you'd be
quite a white glove, but I know what you mean though, because we it would be about standardisation. And one of the early years in around 2008, I remember putting the McDonald's arches up, and I said, what you got to think about is whether you're in Stoke-on-Trent or Beijing, you ask for a cheeseburger, it's going to have that bloody gherkin on it. And you're not going to like it, and you're going to take it off, but it's going to be on because it's standardised, and that's what we need to do. So you would walk in a depot, and there would be notice boards in certain locations, and they all look the same, and they would put their results up on that notice board. So when it was any depot you walk in,
out in the open,
you would have, oh God, yeah, you would be standing there with a customer, and you'd go, oh, how did you do? Again, now some people going back to that 3 decimal places. Those site managers who were fantastic, right? I've got some fabulous memories of spending time in depots with site managers, regional managers, etc. from there. But what we would also do is we would call you out, Joey. So what we would go is, for instance, let's take Sunday service. We go, Sunday service in Dagenham was 99.46%. And you'd go, oh, that sounds pretty good. But then we would put underneath, you were 17th out of 82 depots.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Because what that did, that drove drivers to go, hey, boss, who's this other 16 people who are better than us then? Because otherwise everybody goes, it just becomes like wallpaper. Whoa, we're 99.46%. Oh, we're all right, aren't we? Then we would do that with drivers.
Yeah.
Then we would list the drivers down. And then we would do the likes and the dislikes that we get from the app. We'd always find a way of monitoring and measuring, celebrate success, but also sometimes call out some failures. But people didn't like that.
Yeah.
I had a thing that I wrote out every single week. It was like a blog, right? Every single week. And it was always about operational statistics. This is your cost. We gave down some weeks. I remember one depot, they did 100,000 deliveries. They were talking about 17 failed parcels.
Wow.
That's the level of detail that we got to from there, because that drives people. And do you know what? One of the best things we did, and it cost us pennies, right, is we created a club for the operations people, because the salespeople get a commission and big time Charlies and all this and the other, right? So the operations people, what we said is like, once you've done a certain number of weeks over a delivery level, let's make it up, 99% or something like that from there. Once you got over there, then you'd have a red badge. And then after your red badge, you'd have a silver badge. Then you'd have a gold badge. And then you'd have a black badge. And I had to keep making these badges because these depots
it was going up and up
were
and up.
doing it for so long.
Yeah.
Then they'd be like, hey, boss, what badge are you going to get me? I'd be like, what? And they'd be like, I've hit that number. 52 weeks straight, never dropped out.
Wow.
I was like, shit. And it was like, I used to think, right, what cards have you got? All right, silver card, gold card, a diamond card, a black card. And it was literally like they would walk round in a conference, the operations people, only operations people had the badges, the pins. And it was the DPD logo in a different colour.
Right.
And if you fell out, you had to take that badge off.
Right.
It was embarrassing for them.
Yeah.
Put that badge out and put it in the drawer. And you had to wait 13 weeks to get back in. Then you had to start at red again and go all the way through, right? So the big dogs in the room loved it, right? And it's like, yeah, that's black that. You know what that means, don't you? All right, when you're ready, son. So that camaraderie, competition was to me the framework for how we did things.
Yeah.
And I know some people probably didn't like it. Some people probably thought, oh, this is a bit too much and all this, that, and the other from there. Well, I'm sorry. I never said to anybody, you, Joey, I would say jokingly things like, oh, let's hope the Scotland depot this week is going to improve on this one.
Yeah.
That was how we ran things. And for 13 years, we did exceptionally well. The service was brilliant. You didn't get any money for the badge, by the way.
I was going to ask, was there any financial?
No.
Right.
There would be other things that those managers could get. They would get a yearly bonus, Joey, and all this.
Yeah.
It was the pride.
Yeah.
Let me get my hands on that badge from there. But again, you see, so copyable. Didn't see one in other industries. I didn't see one in another parcel company. And I remember thinking to myself, you people do leave. They bring ideas with them from there. Look, there's some places I've been into and they've got no handle on data and stuff like that from there. So if you've got no handle on data, and you're going to struggle to do the badge and the concept and all of that sort of stuff. DPD, going back to its parcel line days, had its hands on data from the 80s.
Yeah.
And that was probably one of the major things that allowed us to do all of the other stuff that we did as well from there. And we had the entrepreneurial ability, because the French, at the end of the day, as long as we made the profit target and sent all the money back, they were quite happy for us to test things. And then as long as we shared them back within the group, that then people... But, if they wanted to take 5 years in one country to do projects, that wasn't my problem. I used to just go and say, this is what we've done, this is what we've done, this is what we've done. We launched the Precise, which was where we allowed the customer to choose the time. Probably not one of the best decisions we ever made. Never lost any customers, but oh my God, the backlash from the drivers was just horrific, right? So would you have done that again? Not sure, because we never lost a customer while we offered it to them.
Yeah.
But it was tough.
Just ruffled some feathers.
It was really tough to do it because it threw your drivers about. But nobody's perfect. We try our very best. We learn from our mistakes and we move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, what about continuous improvement? Because it sounds like you've got a handle on the people side, but then in terms of continuous improvement, was there anything in the per depot that you thought would be big fixes or big efficiencies to be had? Was there any big moments around continuous?
In the early days, Joey, you do and you learn and you move on, but the more stable you become as a business, you end up having, going back to recruitment, you end up with managers on a subs bench. Yeah. So because we made enough money, we could recruit managers and sit them on a subs bench and go, when anything goes wrong, you'll be going in.
Yeah.
As a football manager, you don't get a big, you don't sign Jose and put him on the bench. He comes in, he runs the team straight away. Some of these other people were desperate to join the organisation and would say, look, we've got nowhere for you at the moment now. So that gave us that ability then that if we did have a wobble, we put people in very quickly. We had ops support people who were always available to just at the drop of a hat go and work, weekend after weekend after weekend to fix some problems. But, with scale becomes stability, becomes the ability to just execute at pace and at volume. Yeah. Whereas if you're a small business, I did a 6-month stint in a much smaller business. No way. You just don't have the team. You don't have the bandwidth to be able to pivot like you do in a large organisation.
Yeah.
And
what would your advice be then if you are like a small business or a mid-sized business? Is it hire your way out of it? I.e., build a team to be able to implement those things.
Yeah, you've got to cut your cloth accordingly, haven't you? Let's be honest. When you're a smaller organisation or often a larger organisation, your payroll cost is your critical one. Yeah. But equally, if you take all the people out and you just leave the machines and the cameras and the microphones, nothing gets done. Yeah. Right. So it is the people that you've got to do from there, trying to bring people with you on the journey. I think I say, and I'm going to say it at this talk I'm doing next week from there, and I said it to the business school. I used to go to a corporate induction, Joey, right? So let's say you joined the organisation and you were a supervisor in a depot from there. And I would meet I would meet all the new people, about 100 people every 6 weeks. We'd be being on 100 people, one after another, right? And I remember used to say to people can you tell me now, if you're in a leadership role, doesn't matter what level, these little hands would sort of go like that. I say, I don't care whether you're in IT, finance, customer services, wherever, sales. Your job is very simple. Your job is to lead and inspire your team to be amazing every day.
Yeah.
I said that thousands of times, right? I said, and let me give you an example, right? When it's summer, sunny, volume's low, drivers have got an ice cream van when they come in at night, it's not difficult. It's not difficult to manage that. When you're busy and it's peak and you've had 10 days of it and people are dropping like flies and the snow's coming down and you need people to dig in, you need to lead and inspire those people, and you need to have had plenty of chips in the bank with those people because you've looked after them through the year and they will look after you. And that was what I used to say to people. And I said it to people in Australia the other day. I said it to the guy that works with me, Paul, lovely guy. I said, at the end of the day, mate, I said, you've got so many skills that you can do. I said, but at the end of the day, all I'm interested in one thing is, can you lead and inspire this little group of ours to double the impact on the business that we're going to do for this year? Because what we'll be expected to do is double it again next year. I said, and that's what it's all about. And we had an example where we had somebody about pay and stuff like that from there. And, it meant the world to them, to do what we did from there. So sometimes you've got to break a little bit. And that's why I don't like gradings. I don't like people when we tell me, oh, no, I can't pay that because of this, that, and the other. I need a little bit of flexibility. I know the bounds I've got to work towards from there. But I think that's how, if I'm a small business, I'd be doing some equity for a start, because if you've got skin in the game and you're going to benefit when I benefit, that's a big one. And I definitely would want to collaborate like that. And, some of the stuff I do with Maiden Stoke, we get no pay, we do it for free. So it's even more difficult when you're trying to enthuse somebody to do something and they're doing it on a volunteer basis. It's even more difficult. But that's how I would do it from a small perspective. But still never forget, you as a manager or a leader is lead and inspire, not just to do a job today, but to be amazing every day. And one of the things, because I know we'll come to an end, if you go into, I don't know if they're still there, but it used to be on the DPD website, people would come to me and they'd say, what's the difference with you, Dwain? And I'd say, oh, my company's full of amazing people. And they'd go, fuck, that's a bit corny. And I go, no, let me show you. Went on the website. We had an amazing tab. Went down. And every month and every year, people internally would be put forward by customers, suppliers, staff members, etc. You could win 20 quid, Joey. The maximum payout was 20 quid and a mug, because I come from Stoke, a mug, and it says, you've been amazing from there. I remember going in customer service, one girl, she had a tree mug, full of them, 6 or 8 mugs. She'd had that many. And I say to people, pick a month. They go, July. Okay, bang, pick a person. And it would say, Joey has been amazing and pulled over the side of the road and this changed this lady's tyre. And I was starting the other, and the lady wrote in from there. I go, there you go. You show me in a competitor where all their amazing people.
Where that's happening.
Because there's mine. And I can see them every month.
It's phenomenal.
And you know what? You can't make it too difficult. You got to say to people, look, here's your vouchers. I understand it's a benefit in kind, but let's not overcomplicate it. Let's not kill this to death. It's an instant gratification. This is not a holiday for two to Fuengirola. This is 20 quid. Right? Pay the tax, 20 quid, give them a mug, celebrate them, take their photo, put it on the website. That's how you look after people, by not spending a lot of money, or you give them a badge and a pin and you point them in the direction. You say, go over there. And I think the other thing, as I used to say, Joey, is I used to say to people is, people would say to me, we're like getting a bonus at the end of the year and all this, that, and the other. I often say to people, how do you know what amazing looks like? And they go, well, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, well, in a year's time, if I come back to you, Joe, and you've started this podcast, and you say to me, I'll tell you what amazing is going to look like. I'm going to have this many downloads or something like that from there. That's what you need to tell people. You need to make it really clear to people. And I used to say to people, here's these top 10 things I want you to do. We all sign them off from there. If you get them done, or if you get 8 out of 10 done from there, you'll have had an amazing year. So that's what amazing looks like. Somebody who sits there and says, I'm in customer services, I'm not responsible for revenue, But I got my KPIs. Finance would have their KPIs. Cash collection would have their KPIs.
Yeah.
You get my debtors days down, you've had an amazing year.
Yeah.
End of story from there. It's really not that difficult. I suppose I've just got lots of little anecdotal stories because I've been doing it for a long time.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And I know you want to share some light on Maiden Stoke, because I know that's, a big part of what you're doing now. What is Maiden Stoke?
Look, Maiden Stoke started many, many years ago by an ex-Labour MP at the time, talking about how can we bring back people who from Stoke-on-Trent,
yes,
and they've left for various reasons. And there is some incredibly well known. We're not all about Robbie Williams and one thing or another, but we do have a lot of well-known people that are ex-Stokies that have left for one thing or another. There's an event in London tomorrow. All the MPs are going. The managing partner of a very, very big law firm is a Stokey, right? But he'll admit himself, they left, probably ex-university. Perhaps their parents have died. They don't come back that often anymore from there. So I stepped in, and I work with an amazing lady called Nikki Twemlow. And Nikki is full-time with the YMCA in Hanley, right? And she's been there all the way through it from there. And I'm there to support her. And she comes very much from the care-type background, and I come from a business background. So we've launched something called the Speaking in Schools. We have about 30 people now on our website, and we're broadcasting that to all the schools across all of Stoke-on-Trent. And basically, they can go on, get a password, pick a speaker who will do a virtual speak. And I said to you just before we started, we've got fighter pilots, we've got CEOs, we've got poets, we've got musicians, and all this sort of thing from there. It's all about raising aspiration. Yeah. Stoke-on-Trent has some of the lowest scores for GCSEs and truancy and you name it, right? If there's a league table, we're at the bottom of it, right? It's not something we're pleased with.
Yeah.
But the one thing that really tugs me is that we have about 1,100 children in care.
Okay.
For our size of our country, which is for our city, which is a lot smaller than Manchester and Birmingham, about the 13th biggest city, that's probably one of the highest per capita in the country from there. So we are launching next Tuesday. So I don't know when this goes out, but that's Tuesday. I think that's the 20th of May.
Yeah.
We're going to launch this Future Ready Pledge. And my objective is to work with Stoke businesses. So it's a collaboration of Stoke-on-Trent City Council.
Yes.
It's the YMCA and the Yes organisation. It's the Chamber of Commerce and Maiden Stoke. Ideally, 50 jobs, 50 apprentices, for people who have come from the care system. So they're not vulnerable, all this, that and the other, but what they are is disadvantaged. They've not probably had a great opportunity in life from there. And some people, look, they can come in phases. I'll just say this, Joey, and I'm done. So you could offer, I'll do some interview techniques, I'll do some CV writing skills, I'll do some work experience. Yeah. I will do an apprenticeship, or I'll do a full-time job. Yes. Right? So you can do whatever grade you want from there. But I'm going to be speaking to the Chamber's Patrons Lunch, I think it is, next week. And my objective is to try and get as many people at the end to talk to me and a lady called Deb Sanderson, who works with us as well from there now, to come along and let's support some of these young people who really, really, really haven't had a great time. And they might be 16, 17 or 18. And there's about 90 kids that come out of the system every year. So the council will tell you that that school leaving college/university, they come. There's about 90 additional people, and I'm saying is, what can we do with 50? Can we help 50 people? It's a target. You've got to have a target. I'm going to try my best, but we only start from 20th of May. We launch the website, so it'll be on the Maiden Stoke website. It'll be on the Chamber of Commerce website. Hopefully, it'll be on the council website, and we'll kick it off next week. So properly from the 1st of June. And I'm just trying to do a little bit something nice for Stoke because they've done lots of nice things for me.
Yeah, no, awesome. All Sounds amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And
thanks, mate. Thanks,
been an absolute pleasure. I
can't believe that's an hour and a quarter.
Is it an hour and a quarter?
An hour and a quarter.
Woo.
Right.
Keep it there.
Yeah, you're good, mate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that.